is interesting. Yay. Wow, it's really fun to be in a room full of trainers and curriculum developers. This is really fun for me. I've got a presentation, a lot of which is an overview that I think is really an overview for you all and builds on what we've already done today. So we're just going to screen through part of it to enable us to have more conversation. So anyway, just starting from so the four things that we're going to cover in pieces in the next hour and a half include some principles and concepts and practical ideas for material and curriculum design. And the principles and concepts we've already pretty much covered, and I'll just add a few and open a discussion for practical discussion on that. And then we're going to devote quite a bit of time to images because that's something that's come up in the survey and in the course of the day. So we're going to try and devote a fair amount of time to images. We'll do a little bit on field testing and managing diverse feedback. There's a lot of experience in this room, and we want to try and hear from each other on that. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit about supporting localization and repackaging and sort of taking it to the field, which is actually the subject of the last part of this whole discussion. So that's our outline. And here's a little bit about me and Hesperian. So most of you are probably familiar. Is everybody here familiar with Hesperian books? Have you used Where There's No Doctor or one of our books? Yes, my favorite.
My favorite too.
Yes, workers of trainers. We love that one. There's other books over there if you want to browse. We've done a lot on general health, but something you might not know as much about, it's a more recent subject, is we've done a lot on environmental health, water and sanitation, forestry, natural resource management, sustainable agriculture, things that you're definitely working on. And that's in a Community Guide to Environmental Health. There's a hard copy over there. Okay, great. This is actually becoming a more and more common thing. There is a laptop over there as well as a book, and actually, if we were being totally realistic, this woman might be holding a cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But this represents a little bit about some of our move more recently into digital tools and digital tools that support people like you. So we'll talk about that during the course of the afternoon. So the first section is really principles and then practical ideas for designing useful and actionable, and that's really what we're talking about, is moving people to take action and make change. Materials and curriculum. And when we designed this, I didn't actually realize how neatly all the pieces were going to fit together, but what we think about when we're developing materials, and it's a little bit different than curriculum, is we're thinking about how a piece of material on a printed on a page or on a computer screen or eventually on your mobile phone, how that information is going to be in dialogue with the reader. So the same kind of dialogue concepts that we were looking at with Mitzi and Bonnie, actually thinking about how to apply that in practice of preparing print materials is what Hesperian thinks about doing. So it just kind of builds on this whole concept of dialogue. So I think we've covered this. You want to start where people are starting from. Know your audience, know what they already know, respect that, and think about what they're coming into this piece of material wanting to know and what it is that they already do know going on. Yes, a nurse may know her topic, but she's not sharing it with others. And we're starting with other people's experience. We're starting from people's own experiences, as we saw with Bonnie. That's really important. And this is, of course, frankly, the biggest challenge for materials developers and curriculum developers. How do we filter out what really has to be in, so that everything we write isn't 1,000 pages long, right? And this is really hard. I think some of the criteria that you developed actually during the the discussion with Mitzi is really helpful here. And the piece of, what I can say from experience point of view is we try and think really, something has to do triple duty to be able to make the cut and get in. It has to support the learning objective, but it also has to support the motivational objective. I'm not using your language, right, but it really needs to support all of those objectives. And if it doesn't make it, because otherwise our books really would be 1,000 pages long. We'd have hard enough time. So we can talk a little bit more about any of these that you want to go into depth on, but maybe we should just do an overview and then come back to where you get information. But I feel like, again, this is covering a lot that we've already covered. So next slide. This may be something we want to spend a little more time on, coming back to, which is language and clarity of language. And I know we talked about some tools to measure grade reading level, Tom. I forget the name of that tool, but I wrote it down.
Well, Mr. talking about the SMOG levels, but for others.
Yeah. So there's different tools to measure sort of reading level of the sentences you're writing and the words you're writing. But an additional sort of criteria or way that we like to think about reading level is actually the information inside the sentence or inside the paragraph and making it as relevant as possible. So relevant information that's acknowledging the context people are using that information in, makes it useful and actionable, and makes it not abstract. So in addition to tools about, measuring whether your sentence length and grammar constructions are awkward or, higher level education or if your word choices, really thinking about, is the paragraph conveying it this way? And that can help ground something, sometimes pretty complex words or sentences or concepts. So this is something that is easier said than done, but a really important key principle for us. Go on. Another key principle, because we write about health, is start with life, not anatomy. It's so easy to fall into textbook sort of approaches to sharing that information that we know we have to manage to get out in that piece of the curriculum. And so starting with where people are coming from and not like the body system in this case, no, but you start with the problems that people are experiencing and from there go into the body system.
So that's very similar to the relation to my life piece.
Exactly. I mean, these things are mapping so closely. And offering practical solutions, again, if there isn't something practical about a piece of content, eventually, it really shouldn't be in that material because people need to be able to act on it. And if they can't act on that information, you really need to think twice about why it's in your manual or your curriculum or your handout or your flyer. So this is just an example of some practical information in one of our books. This one is speaking a little bit more to the emotional aspect, but a really important one. I think it also speaks to something we were doing with Bonnie, really starting where people are at and really bringing them in. And that's finding opportunities for compassion and validation. Really, particularly for this kind of content that we're talking about, it's so easy to fall into the do this, do that, and thinking about, well, what makes it hard? How can we have compassion? How can we talk about STIs and not blame men? Really looking at some ways to find opportunities to acknowledge how hard it can be to actually put some of the stuff that we're telling people to do in practice. So that's an important thing that we try and do. Avoiding jargon is probably clear for everybody here. This is what you already do, so may not need to add a lot more to that. Just watch for it because we all fall into the jargon of our field, and so it's really easy to not recognize jargon after a while. And here's just another summary of the same thing that we were talking about, and it's just one way that we think about active learning, which is really helping people move all the way across the scale to discovering that information for their own application. Again, particularly challenging when you're thinking about print material because you're needing to sort of have people walk through that step on their own, not with the help of a facilitator. But this is the ultimate goal. We try and include opportunities throughout any kind of material that we're developing to encourage people to examine the root causes of a health problem. Now, in a training, you would do that as a structured activity. If in print material, I'll show you some examples of how we do it if you're interested, but we model why games, we model, actually show drawings of the trees you were talking about, you know, with some of it filled in and questions for people to answer, questions for discussion.
Chain of causes.
Chain of causes. So we'll try and model that sort of thing in there that's a clue for the reader and also for the trainer who might be repackaging that content into a training or training material. Okay, next. And it's not over when it's over. It's particularly if you're working on print material, it's so tempting to tie everything up in a neat, nice package, have it all end neatly if you want it to end that way. But actually what you want is you want to create an opportunity for people to end that chapter or that flyer and what more? You know, you want to kind of create some ways out of that and into some new things that they can explore beyond that lesson plan or beyond the chapter that you're drafting in a manual. So we sometimes actually tying everything up into a really tight, neat package is not what you want. You want to leave a few loose threads that are pieces and encouraging and motivating. So that's some of what we think about in terms of design and writing principles. Here's some other very basic design principles that actually I should get some of these books out and let you look at them while we're talking. Okay. You want to do that? So if you're not familiar with this varying materials, our design principles are part of what we're pretty well known for and trying to make the design as easy to read for people who don't necessarily have a lot of formal education or formal literacy. That said, they're not necessarily low literacy materials. We try and aim for a 4th grade reading level. So that's not low literacy by any means, but we try and make them accessible enough for somebody without a lot of education. And design is an important part of that. So consistent and easy to follow presentation and structure, clean layout, use of pictures and icons are some of the key things that we think about as we're doing that. And here's some examples. So this is an example of consistent structure and presentation, in this case for activities. In the Community Guide to Environmental Health, in fact, where we're trying to make it as easy as possible for a reader to sort of see the steps, calling out the steps. There's a structure that's repeated throughout that book for all of the different activities. So sort of consistency in presentation, although we break every rule of consistency we set. There's always something that doesn't work, but, you know, that's what you try. The next one. We actually try and put in activities into all of our books, and we think of those as kind of a lifeline for somebody who's not a skilled trainer, who maybe it's that Peace Corps volunteer that's, you know, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and they're trying to do a health education thing, and we're at least giving them something to work with. So it's not replacing a full curriculum, but we do try and embed in actually most topics a few easy activities that might just get something started in the community, help seed something. So that's one example. Okay, and that's actually the end of this first section. So originally, this was going to be much longer, but I realized that we're repeating a lot of what we covered. So we've got a few more minutes on this, and I'm interested to hear actually what principles you would want to add to this, to this overview, and or if there's some questions or issues you'd like more information on in terms of how historian does it. For example, I could talk more about headings, like heading structures, or voice, or units of information, or anything else. So it's kind of open to add principles or questions you'd like more.
The idea about only include the most essential pieces, not the useful or whatever that other outline one was, I think is really key because that speaks to the too much content for the lens if you're doing a curriculum. So I'd like to know what is the process that you use to identify the most essential or critical things. I don't know what's essential.
Okay. Should we get a few more questions out there and then I can speak to a couple of them? Or? Yeah.
I had a question. I noticed one thing you do that I don't see in a lot of materials. You have like pictures of people and bubbles about what they're saying or thinking, and it's like all through the books you use that. Is there data you've seen that shows that that's really effective? It seems to be really effective, and I think maybe we should do it more. But I didn't know if you guys had found that.
You provide or have you provided guidance on adapting your imagery for things? And I know your material is in hundreds of languages.
Oh gosh, I forgot to mention that.
I wanted you to mention that.
88 actually.
Wow. So have you provided guidance to countries who are adapting it, or is that thought to be important?
Why don't we talk? I'll talk about the adaptation piece later on and image adaptation in images. That's a good question. Other guidelines people want to add from your own experience? Because there's a lot of experience in this room.
A practical one. Have you partnered with a Title II organization to create their content?
No, we have not. I don't think.
That's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Who do you partner with? Okay. All right. Well, this is some good questions.
I kind of have one. So we have this massive tome for CMAM that was developed by Santa II that I use as my CMAM Bible. But everywhere that I've seen it used, people say it's good. I mean, it really is. It has everything in it. But we need something simpler. As a guide, would you ever do one for CMAM? Because I teach out for other topics. And it's so widely used around the world now.
What is CMAM?
Oh, sorry. It's the community-based management of acute malnutrition. And it's got an inpatient component that probably would be too complicated for a guide like that, but all the outpatient and outreach components would actually work really well with a guide like that.
Okay, great. Let's talk about that too. Okay. And I'm watching my time so we don't rob from images. Okay. Take it from the top. Actually, can we go backwards to that slide on essential? There it is. Yeah, this is absolutely the hardest part of our job. And it happens over the course of, our process will start with an outline, we'll get input from the community on and experts like you, will get input from hundreds of people about what needs to be included in a piece of material. Whether first it'll be a book, and it'll be topics, and then it'll be the chapter, and sort of each time we get input about what needs to be part of that, which generally balloons the thing out, so, like forever, right? So then the next step is whittling that back down. And we do use, actually, it's sort of, I think of it as a sieve where things have to pass through every single layer to be able to make the cut. And so it has to be essential to know, not just nice, and why is it essential to know? And actually the writer has to make the case for why. Because writers will want to throw everything else in here. Why is that really essential to know? It has to be totally supporting action. If it doesn't support action in some way, either motivating action or practical application, it doesn't make the cut. And it's somewhere out here, but it's not there. So those are two tests that we give, and it has to support, of course, the key objectives of the chapter or the piece of material or the lesson plan. So it has to, we sort of take everything through passes. But I'll be honest, when we develop a draft that we send out for field testing, it's usually about 50% longer than the end chapter is going to be. And a lot of stuff ends up on the cutting floor after that point. I guess it's similar to a film.
Yeah.
More similar to a film than I'd like to think of it. Things that just didn't seem to carry enough weight are what gets cut afterwards, and we just work ruthlessly on trimming every step of the way because it always balloons out. I don't know if that's really applicable, but you all, if you're trainers, you have the same problem. I don't know if there's other principles we can extract from this conversation that are useful, because I know this is like a central problem for all of us.
One of the things I was always taught was doing a task analysis initially around, what is it that somebody doing this job needs to be able to do, and then segmenting what, of that, some of those things they just need to hire someone with some of those, especially attitude or skill stuff ahead of time, versus what are the skills that can be taught.
Mm-hmm.
And then, continually going back to that task analysis.
Right.
Something that I've found often is that for some reason everyone wants to have terms defined, and so they're like, there are 3 titles of this category, and they are X, Y, and Z. X means this, Y means, I'm like, that doesn't matter. I don't care what you call it. They just need to know the danger sign or whatever.
Right.
So I often found that there's a lot of stuff about knowing the exact terminology to use and having how to define it that I always remove, which makes people angry, but it's not useful information from the people that we're reaching.
We have a similar problem. Everybody has their favorite ways to create categories of information. And but you only need one of them. A chapter does not need 6 of them. And so we ultimately have to choose if we're even going to invest the page space in giving people that categorization. It really needs to help them understand information. Otherwise, it's nice, but it's probably nicer for us, trainers or owners or experts, than it is actually for the recipients. That'll beef out content a lot. Any other suggestions on how to keep things trimmed down, trim and slim?
I guess one of the things I'm thinking of is always going back to your objectives. Like I think of, there was this hygiene module I was reviewing. The objective was to reduce diarrhea, but the flip chart had cut your fingernails short and wash your hair regularly and wash your body. And it was like, what does that have to do with the child? So it's kind of like none of these contribute to reducing diarrhea, so throw it all out. It's kind of.
Or that they're so far flung. Yeah.
It's not the most important.
Yeah. That and razor-based use of HIV.
And for those of you who have to repackage your stuff a lot, and most of us, I think we all admitted to repackaging, when you are repackaging stuff, that's the easiest thing to fall into, because somebody else's thing that you're borrowing from may have had different objectives, and so you have to totally cut out all the stuff that might have made sense for theirs but don't make sense for yours. And that's actually a really important point, particularly for all of us who repackage.
And often it's not known for what audience that was created, because it's often not stated, and so you don't know that.
Sometimes that requires real negotiation skills, because I work a lot with multiple partners, and everybody wants to bring their thing to the table, and you often have to figure out how to cut through and they have requirements. You want them to be promoting X, Y, or Z, and how to negotiate what they're really going to do.
And it's true, and everybody brings their special frameworks and their special terms, and it is hard, absolutely. But it's really worth it, because too much and it clutters up the ability of the material to do its job.
And that is a bit of a structural problem. I feel like donors actually push for, they'd rather see 40 behaviors in your list and everyone's happy that's reviewing it But if you go too short, which is really, you can make some big change happen, then you're going to get dinged. You might not even get the grant. So.
We might throw that into that parking lot of field test, too, because this is certainly a dangerous field test. Okay. A quickie on speech bubbles, although, we can talk about that more, I think, in your images as well. But we do use it briefly. I'll say that we started using it more, actually, in the book Helping Children Who Are Deaf. And it was almost, we were thinking of it as almost like a little Brechtian kind of like stand aside and have an outside voice comment on the text to underline the authority of the book. Like a book will have authority in a way that you actually don't want it to when it's engaging in dialogue with the reader. The book isn't supposed to tell the reader everything. The reader has to say and think critically, I like this, I don't like that. This will work for my kids, that won't. And so we introduced these little speech bubble characters to actually critique the content, so to speak, to encourage the reader to do the same thing. And that was when we started doing more of that. We had done some of it in earlier books, but we did a lot more of it starting in Helping Children Who Are Deaf. Did it work? We think so. It's actually, Conrad, the Hilton Deaf Schools are using that book. It's been translated into about 20 languages. And one of the things that we asked them was whether parents found that helpful. And we're getting feedback that parents have found that really helpful. Because most of it was about encouraging parents to adapt, because particularly activities with small children where you're just trying to do cognitive stimulation, you really have to go off of what's happening with the child. And so you want parents to not follow the book step by step. You want parents to apply it based on what's really happening. So that's the story of speech bubbles a little bit. We partner with hundreds of people all over the world, but I'll talk about that in the field testing and nutrition adaptation. We actually are doing new content for a new what we think of as the new Where There Is No Doctor. And one of the things that people have found missing in the old Where There Is No Doctor is more guidance on how to work with child. So we have a chapter on that that's actually in the Help Wiki Outside. So we'll take a look at that later. Okay, so images is up next. So our images, Historian's images are really fairly well known and widely used. I stole from Historian images way back when, before the digital era, by photocopying them and sizing them on a photocopier, and then using a stencil cutter. Does anybody here are you old enough to know what a stencil cutter is? This is like a generational thing. Be glad? No. If you don't know it, be glad you don't know about a stencil cutter. Things have gotten much better. But anyway, it's been going on for a long time, and our images are reused and repackaged, and that's really the whole point of the open copyright that Historian has. Repackage the content, repackage the images. But this is an example of one of our images, and then how Translation Partners, next slide, redid those same images. This is one from the Environmental Health book, actually. And so these are community meetings in 3 different settings, and they just sketched in their own settings. So a lot of what happens is when people see an image, artists can more easily sort of adapt it very quickly to their setting and localize it that way. And that's actually was part of what you were asking. We encourage that, although we actually believe there's a role in having diversity in images as well. But people really often will do that, and it's something we encourage. So,
and sometimes having an image that you put up there and can react to and then flying around, but having instead of a blank sheet of paper, having.
Exactly. And that can really help. So we do encourage that. I've got a handout, last minute thing. So yesterday, I sent out an email to Hesperian staff, and I said they want a handout for tomorrow on images. Everybody give your favorite tip for working with artists. And so what I have is literally an email brainstorm from some of Hesperian staff, so it is by no means a complete thing. It's a starting place, but we can share that. I'm going to actually keep one because what role do images play in Hesperian content? And so that was the first question I asked our staff to send me an email about. And so literally this thing is cut and pasted from their brainstorm, but it's a start. And you can. But it's useful to think about if you are trying to illustrate a piece of material. You know, sometimes we just put an image in there because we think it looks nice, and it breaks up the page, and that's okay. If that's important too. You want to break up the page. You want it to look nice. You want it to look attractive, because people will read the material if it looks attractive. But images can play a much more critical role in actually conveying content, and this is some of the ways that we do it. Oh, I see. Oh, that's not really legible, is it? I don't wait.
All right, they've got it in front of them.
That's okay. They've got it in front of them. So we can go back to the slides.
I think that enables the remote.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
That's good.
we can also scroll down. We can send all of these handouts, we can post them and send them electronically, both to the folks online as well as folks.
Okay. Well, in that case, why don't we take this view of what they do so that folks are focused.
Good landscape.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is just some of the ways that images play an important role in conveying content. So certainly it's useful for people for conveying ideas about words. You can really convey, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can make a message much stronger with images. You can illustrate clearly steps that are hard to explain. You can draw out the most important information. Illustrate something that's confusing. You can break up the page. You can warm up the text. Some of the things that are maybe on here that are less clear are engaging in dialogue with the reader, which actually we were talking about a little bit with the speech bubbles, but it isn't just in speech bubble form, where a reader will read and think about something like that, and it just invites them into thinking and engaging in a different kind of a way in dialogue. I think another way that may not be commonly thought of is we use it as a way to change voice. Sometimes our content will be in third person where, a woman should do this, the baby will look this way. And then you want to have a change of voice, but you can't do that while you're writing. But if you have an image in there, you can actually sort of change the voice of what's going on and invite the reader in a different way. So that's another use that we use images for. I think, so these are some tips, and I don't think we are going to go over them necessarily. I'm just going to hand them out to you, and then we can discuss them if there's time. Yeah.
I just got a little light bulb.
Okay.
And
an aha moment?
Yeah, an aha moment, it was. We now talk in the BBC training about determinant-based messages.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a chance to do formative research or look online to see which determinants affect a certain behavior amongst this target audience, then you might want to change your messages to reflect that determinant. Has Hesperin ever thought of determinant-based images? I was thinking about it because this one says illustrate processes, steps, materials, positions of the body. That relates to cue for action determinants.
Mm-hmm.
That was my little light bulb.
So it relates to what?
Cue for action. If somebody can't remember, I can't do this because I can't remember the steps to do it. And so if you have an image that has, here are the steps and maybe illustrations that show the steps, then that would be a visual tool that addresses that determinant. So that made me think, well, maybe there are images that specifically relate to specific determinants. So, for example, one might be a dialogue that's happening on a piece of paper between a mother-in-law and a mother about exclusive breastfeeding, social norms. A dialogue between a cutter and a mother of a daughter of the right age that might be coming up for vision. You know, specific images that reflect a determinant related to a specific behavior would be super powerful.
Exactly. Okay, we're gonna. I think we'll touch on that in a minute.
Cool.
Although we tend to think of the image and the content around it as more of a unit.
Yeah.
But it's. I think that there is some. You've got an idea there that we can come back to for sure. And you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, Laura. Yeah, I was just going to comment on what Bonnie was saying and how our beneficiaries are not so used to looking at imagery a lot and not bombarded by media like we are. So, like developing determinant-based images. Yeah, like colors, really basic.
Yeah, there's I think there's World Neighbors study in Haiti on pictorial literacy. We need to get that on the website because that was fascinating. They showed images and then said like how many people could interpret what it was really low, and how many people added stuff to it that wasn't there. And a woman sitting on a donkey breastfeeding when there's no donkey, and it was just, I think, very good to remember that if you're working with people that don't see a lot of images,
Right.
They don't know what's going on in this picture.
Right.
The first question is, what do you see here?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know what? Okay. Great. All right. All right. I'm going to bookmark this topic of sort of the issue about what are the most effective images for conveying, and we'll come right back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the option of using photos.
Okay. It's sort of related, so let's clump that together. Good. Okay. So sort of what's actually effective for audiences that aren't used to a lot of media, and photos, types of drawings, that's a whole category of discussion that why don't we acknowledge and come back to shortly. Okay, and on this, I think we can skip over the rest of the tips, and actually the other thing that I wanted to show, okay, so here's some examples of exactly what I was describing, drawings for discussion. The next slide is drawings for dialogue, I think. Oh, technical drawings. And the third, what was the drawings for dialogue drawings, which is actually a speech bubble, good example of a speech bubble. So I wanted to show you all something that is a new tool that I think will be useful for everybody. And Tom and I wanted to make sure that you got to see this, and then I think we can open up for discussion on these and any other questions that emerge. So I'm going to switch over to the screen share for our online viewers. And this is an online image library. So Hesperian's got 1,000 images up here so far that are available for download for people like you. And this is our website that I'm going to get right now to the image library, which you can get to from our website. And this was, so these images were tagged by lots of volunteers, including Missy. We can talk about that process, but let's just do a couple of examples here to just show you how you can find something and the tagging structure. We could try fever and newborn, something like that. Right, without my glass.
By newborn, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to put my glasses on. All right. And my log. Let's just, well, actually, let me just make sure we're working this. Okay. scrolling over, there's 68 images under fever. That's too many. So we're going to try and refine the search here. Let's do newborn.
Child might work better.
You're right. Okay. We look for child. We're getting a lot. So let's do this. Let's go down to this. We can see that there's 5 here for child. Those 5. Fever. We can look at breastfeeding. Should we look at breastfeeding? We have 146 of breastfeeding. That's too many. We want a picture of a mother and a baby together. So we can look here. We can look at ethnicities. And say we want a mother and a baby. Well, first let's actually just.
So all of these pop up when you put in breastfeeding, even though some of them don't look at all like they're related to breastfeeding.
Right. Somebody tagged them with related to breastfeeding, but we're going to get a smaller.
But also, like, well, as a tagger, I can tell you, when you select an image and you start tagging it, they say, look at the context around it. So what's written in the book around that picture. So if it's actually a breastfeeding topic, like the vomiting might be, what if my child vomits after breastfeeding? So it might show up vomiting after in the breastfeeding.
Like immediately after delivery, start breastfeeding the placenta. That had a picture of the baby just coming out with the umbilical cord.
Exactly.
So it's probably a related content from what was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So we can also look for settings, inside, outside, rural, factory. There's breastfeeding in a factory. That's nice. We can look for keywords. We can look for emotions, which is pretty important. Somebody was telling me that they need to always have, you're trying to reinforce something really positive. So let's look and see
What about the angry breastfeeding mother?
I'm interested in what that is, but more likely we're going to want to use that. Oh, yeah. Somebody who's angry. Okay.
Why is she angry?
I think it's teething. Yeah, exactly. Ow!
Or bad attachment. Bad
Could
attachment
be.
is
Now,
very
so
painful.
I definitely don't want that. So I'm going to go back here. I got rid of that tag, and I want happy. I definitely want happy breastfeeding. Okay. So we can see what, And then we can also search for ethnicity inside of here. We want Latin.
So I do recall that I think a lot of the books that we were tagging first were from Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
So and we are encouraged to tag other ethnicities that could possibly be the same. It's not super.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get interpretation. North Africa, you get, and sometimes some of the artists actually do draw in a kind of multi-ethnic way, which is essentially what you're looking for. So, so the point of this, I think, is to let me just sort of go through the different kind of tags really fast, and then we can, and then what you can do is you can download each of these images, which if you've got time, I'll download an image, and we're going to be releasing a cropping tool soon so that you can say, I like this image, but I want to cut that thing out of it, or I like this and not that, so that it just makes it that much easier for you before you're actually downloading crops and things you don't want.
And you said eventually you might be able to even edit online, right?
Yeah, we're hoping to eventually, the cropping tool we think we'll be able to make available within 6 months, maybe sooner, and we may have a beta out for people that staff and other guys or people who most likely do that. And then the idea is eventually also invite people to share adaptations of images, so that as somebody localizes one of these, or as somebody simply has more collections to add, those collections can be added. This particular database is hosted by a third party and use a lot of space on this thing. So we want to use it as much as possible. Yeah.
What format are they?
They can be downloaded in TIFF, in PNG, JPEG, yeah. And you can also choose sort of what resolution you want, how big a file or not.
They're like an Illustrator file.
Yeah.
And are most of them high res to begin with?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little variable, but we aren't putting them up there unless they can be used as print material. So they're pretty high res.
And free up to a certain number, is that right?
So right now it's free. I think it's free for 5 downloads a month, and we're asking you to sign up. And if you want more, just to let us know, because you're helping us test this and test the effectiveness of it, and we're getting feedback on the keyword structure and a lot of other things. We're going to be moving to a pay-what-you-can model, because this actually costs money to maintain, and we have to reduce the cost, or it's going to come down. So we are moving to a pay-what-you-can model, but the idea is to try and reflect the same sliding scale that we've had all along with our materials.
And if you want to know what they're valued, barrier analysis, we got one of the same artists that worked with us, Barry, to create a lot of our images, and a small one I think was maybe $30 or $40, and a bigger one was about $50 or $60 each.
Right, and that's not counting your staff time to actually commission the art, so which is it's not insignificant. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you have any. I've run up against this issue with other sets of images that I'm interested in making available to people, but there's some hesitancy about how images are actually. Would you allow people to use the images, say, for wider scene, where you don't want necessarily a commercial industrial or company to use your images to promote their products?
You know, like baby formula campaign.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 different levels of this, because one, we actually are trying to track where and what happens with the information, more for us to know about the impact and reach and spread and where it goes. And the artists actually, even though they're letting us do this, and you'll notice that you can also search by artist. If you like one of our artists, you can find all of their stuff in there too. But they also actually want to know. So there's a place when you're downloading where it says, what are you going to use this for? And it's a little bit the honor system, but it is asking you to sort of fill it out and just say, oh, I'm using it for X, Y, or Z thing. There is a licensing agreement for commercial uses, and that people are required to sort of talk to us about that, and that's actually primarily for things like infant formula and some kinds of things that we, would want to be a little careful about. But it's really there as a tool for the kind of uses that everybody in this room represents, which is the kind of ways that this content can be recycled, be reused, repackaged, and go out to the world, and save time and money.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do with this.
How do you send pictures to Spirit?
Oh, if you want to contribute an image to the image library, you can email it to, I think right now the way to do it is there's an email address called images@hesperian.org, which is also the helpline if you are trying to use our image library and are having questions or comments or concerns. So it's a one-size-fits-all email address answered by actually a team of really devoted volunteers who watch that about 24 hours a day, honestly, because people all over the world are using it. So. And it has been, even though it's only been up about 6 months, it's been used by folks in 165 countries. So it's definitely getting some use. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. So the other question was about literacy and people's ability to read images. I could speak to that briefly. this is actually a topic that I think isn't fully resolved. And maybe it's not fully resolved because people's graphic literacy is an ever-evolving thing. You know, what was true 20 years ago isn't necessarily true today in terms of how people understand and read and interpret images. And so I think that the source that Tom was citing about Haiti is one of the more recently done studies. And I think more study is actually needed on this. We still believe, for both practical reasons as well as some of those studies, that simple line drawings are the most readable for people. That is certainly what was true in most of the studies, including the one that Tom was speaking about. On a practical front, they're easier to photocopy or copy and reproduce, which is something that's important also to us because the pictures get reused so much. So those are two reasons why we really go with the simple line drawings as compared to photos. Photos introduce a lot of realism that can be very hard to read for people unless it's exactly the context that they know, is what the studies I've seen have shown. And they don't reproduce as well. They get fuzzy. They're harder to look at. So those are two reasons why we don't use photos in the books, but I know a lot of people do. And again, I think it varies according to what you're trying to do. But what we do is we often will show an artist with a photo what it is that we want, and they'll use that photo to draw a line drawing for us. And it's sometimes one of the fastest and easiest ways to talk to artists about something that looks like this, or here's a picture of that agricultural implement that I want in this picture, you know, and you may not know what it looks like, so here's a photo of it. So we do a lot of that. I don't know if that speaks to that question. Are there others about images, and then we can move on?
The things that I was very curious to see that one picture where you showed the original and then two adaptations, and I was trying to pick up what are the fewest things that need to be adopted to make it relevant. And what I picked up on was building, shape, and clothes, and it wasn't close enough, but I think hairstyle makes a difference. So those three things are things that I would be tending to adapt if I got one.
If people, I mean, what we've noticed, and I'll have to say this is anecdotal, I mean, this is just my impressions, but clothing is probably the first thing that people adapt, and really important, and particularly if it's an issue about a culture where showing part of the body is not appropriate, then they get closed. So clothing, hairstyles to make people look more like the people, ethnic groups. Certainly the housing, what people are sitting on seems to be a big deal. You know, which makes a lot of sense. If it's stuff about food, of course, there's a lot of adaptation as one would expect. And that's, I think, this is a topic you all work on, so I'm sure you see that. That's a really critical thing to be adapting. So those are some of the things that I think are the most adapted. But you'll get funny little things like somebody will add chickens in there or take the chickens out. Clearly was very intentional, and I'm not sure why, but that sort of background interest thing will often get adapted.
I understand what you're saying about, you know, regarding people in the drawings as opposed to photographs. Wondering what your experience is, though, regarding food stuff, blueberries. I mean, whether that is another kettle of fish, as it were, that, you know, people, okay, putting a fish in, that's kind of obvious, but things like, you know, blueberries, wheat, you know, if you're getting into types of food, for example, whether photographs might depict that more accurately, whether people could relate to that better.
I bet people in this room have better information on that than I do, honestly. I think it would have to be very locally specific, given how much variability there is in food, but if you're doing it really locally, that may actually be very effective.
I think photographs of food is easier to see and recognize than most pictures that I've seen.
I know when we do fruit, we usually have one whole fruit and then we chop it open, because usually the seed arrangement is pretty obvious in a drawing. Because like mango, orange, there's a lot of small, like orange,
yeah.
and lime, but all look very similar, so the seeds kind of help.
Yeah.
And the problem is you're looking at black and white instead of color. You
Yeah.
don't have
That's
that.
true. Black and white photos
Yeah.
are, I think, particularly hard to interpret if they've gone through one or two iterations of copying. They're gone. But a color, again, I think this is honestly, I think all of us sharing any information we've seen on studies about graphics and people's ability to read them is something worth sharing because it is a constantly evolving field of study.
I don't know how television impacts that because, televisions are pretty in a lot of very rural areas now, and it seems that kind of thing helps them with colored images. I don't know.
I mean, personally, I think it does. I think that if folks are doing studies on this, they're going to see that exposure to that kind of image over time, people learn to interpret more clearly what they're seeing. And I have no idea what's really going on with the web and what exposure to the websites and web generally is doing for people's ability to read graphic images. But I suspect it's having a huge influence.
This is totally anecdotal, but what I experienced 30 years ago in trying to develop visual images is not at all relevant today. All of those things we were concerned about, the visual literacy has increased amazingly. And
so we are trying to keep up with it, but I think I mean, I think we're always going to be evolving. I think that's normal. Yeah.
I also wonder if the saturation of tone has really helped that a lot.
One thing though, we used to do more cartoony drawings, and we backed away from that because the feedback we were getting suggested that they actually weren't being well read cross-culturally, and have gone towards more realistic images, having body proportions correct, and just more realistic images do seem to really be more effective. But yeah, it's true. There's a whole generation that now interprets emoticons very differently, so that may change things again.
I just have a question, and this is kind of open to everybody. You have a really good site that focuses very much on health and nutrition, and I was just wondering if anybody knows of a similar site that has graphic images focused on agricultural topics.
Actually, we realized that there wasn't that, and so we actually have so many in the TOPS budget that we thought of trying to pull together everything that, at least in our community of practice, has been used, having it coded and making it available to widen it out. Because you've got WASH and health and nutrition, but we don't have ag and NRM, very little on.
Right. We have, I mean, there's some ag pictures for sure, but it's not a wide library. And this group of your organization has a lot of images.
So the question is, how much of a need is that for people, those of you working ag and NRM, and would it be used? Because, if we only want to develop that if there's a real need.
I think that there is. I think that generally what winds up happening is that many of us just develop them. A lot of them are very technical focused, the right way. We have a number of them that we've used, that we're using constantly, and I think they're developed separately in each context.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have electronic copies? That's another big question, because some people say, we got them, they're all on flip charts in the field, and then it's like, how are we going to get that, get it scanned, get it to you? So I didn't know.
This is something I can check out, but
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm sure you all have exactly what happened.
Yeah, anyone else interested in that? Because we need to, that's one of the questions we had. Okay.
I think it would be useful because when I do DVC trainings with Aggies and we get to the select your activities, the only thing they can think of is farmer field schools. And part of that would be addressed if we had more images.
like showing different practices.
Yeah, right, yeah, to create dialogue, because, I mean, yeah, there's only so much you can do with it.
FH, a long time ago, we did an analysis in a couple different fields of our behavior change, and what we found is, like, ag was so weak. Health and nutrition often had lesson plans. They weren't the best lesson plans to went to ag and nutrition. It's like, we just take this flip chart out and start using it. There were no lesson plans. It just seemed to be a lot further behind with imagery, with lesson plans, all of that.
So, I mean, there are some images up here, but Tom's quite right that it's not a huge, relative to the rest of the 10,000 images, it's a small subset that you can use for food security and ag already. But, yeah, we would so love to expand that because, in fact, we're trying to encourage more of the integration that this group represents here. We're trying to encourage that kind of, you know, if somebody's doing training on nutrition, make sure that they're including something about agriculture and vice versa. And so making those images that sort of cross those different topics available in the same place, we think is going to help support people like you who are doing that kind of integrated approach. So,
Any feedback online?
oh, yeah, we didn't actually check that.
And like Google Images, you get a ton of pictures, but hardly any line drawings, and that's what we felt.
So, Tom, do you have something to move with on that?
A couple, yeah, it sounds like a couple of people have expressed it. We'll probably need to put the question out to the poll.
And the ag task force will probably
yeah. How many of you principally work in ag and NRM? That's part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's difficult to ask this audience.
You know, I'm going to just briefly, because it is the same library, we're also going to be piloting something called a Health Materials Exchange, where people can submit materials and we'll tag them according to keywords so that they're searchable. In that same kind of a database. It would be separate from the images, so that you wouldn't get those when you're looking for images. But so for flyers, handouts, posters, things that might be flip charts, things that might be recyclable that way. If they're up for sharing, that's one of the things that we're piloting with just putting our own stuff up, but we're trying, and our partners, but we're trying to get more. Okay. Moving on from images. Okay. The next piece is we're going to talk briefly about field testing. So I think that folks in this room have plenty of experience field testing, but I'll tell you very briefly, Hesperian does a very iterative process of field testing and getting feedback from the field as we develop content. So what we do is we get feedback about what even the scope of a book is going to be, and then the scope of a chapter, and the topics within it. And then as we draft material, we prepare it for a formal kind of field testing that represents, at least we look for about 20 groups who will use that content in different kinds of settings, in different cultural contexts, to give us as much feedback as we can get. And so at the end of the day, we'll have a book like the Community Guide to Environmental Health that had something like 400 different field test sites involved in that process at one stage or another. So it's pretty extensive, and it's given us a lot of experience about doing field testing. These are just some very general guidelines. Certainly things to ask for are about how understandable it is. Were you finding the information you expected to find? You know, was the information useful? Do you want more? Do you want to read more? Do you want to learn more? If they don't, my gosh, we haven't done a good job. How can it be improved? We always ask that. We provide pretty detailed guidelines in that respect. But one of the things that I wanted to pull out and highlight to you all, and I think it emphasizes this issue of dialogue, we asked the field test facilitator to watch for a number of things and report on them that aren't questions to the group, that are things that we're asking them to tell us about what happened. And one of them is, what generated the most discussion? Because that, for us, is actually the key. We want print material that generates discussion. It it might even generate some disagreement in the group, but if it generated discussion, then that's something we really want to keep. That doesn't go on the cutting floor. That stays because that's achieving part of our objective. So because we're trying to create print material that will dialogue with people, and if they're starting to discuss it, if it really provokes discussion, then it's doing a good job. Now, I see Bonnie thinking about that one.
Yeah, because I've had discussion that said to me, oh, my God, this is a terrible image. I mean, going back to those good old days that I was referring to where you had out-of-proportion things. I mean, we've all seen this massive mosquito on the mosquito net that's like 400 times larger than a mosquito. Well, I tested this picture amongst my wonderful Burkina Bay women, and they all spent time talking about, oh my God, have you ever seen a mosquito as big as that? Or the one with the arm that's detached from the person just so that you can enlarge something that's happening on the arm, and then they spent all their time talking about, oh, what happened to the person in the arm?
I can correct it. Yes, it's not just that, because that obviously would go into the feedback that's up here. Right. But if the actual sort of content generated some discussion within the field test group, that's really a good thing. So that's what I meant more than that, yes. But of course we want to know that too, but then we'll change it.
The people who will be using it, but some of us will be your trainers, right? But don't you actually want to hear from the people who are directly participating in the session, or do you want to hear from mainly from the people who use it? What we'll often do for field testing, called field review, actually trainers in the field, or probably the field staff of some of your organizations, people with a lot of experience on the ground, but they're not the end users, but they're probably an intermediary who's going to get that information to the community. So we'll ask a large group of people to review, and we call them field reviewers. And then we'll ask maybe a more limited number, so 20 to 30 groups, to actually try and do like a focus group or sometimes tryout activities that is representing more a community-based user. It will often be facilitated by that field staff person. So we'll ask questions of the facilitator. What did the group, how did the group react? What did they say? Were they uncomfortable? Some things that the group wouldn't necessarily answer questions, but you're wanting the facilitator's feedback on. And then there's questions that are actually being asked of the focus group. And we'll suggest those questions, and then people are invited to share anything else that they see about the draft chapter as well. So at the end of the day, we get just about, we get a pile of feedback. And the part of my job I actually love the best is getting to read it all when I get to. And that's the next slide. So be prepared for conflicting feedback. One of the easiest traps to fall into with field testing, and I'm sure you all know this, is, oh, let's just field test it, and then we'll get the answer. You won't get the answer, but you will find out if there's a problem. And that's so obvious, I know you all know that, but it's good to remind yourselves of that. So what we often will do, though, is put that feedback in dialogue, in essence, with different people. So it's almost as though we're having imaginary conversations between the folks in Burkina Faso giving one kind of feedback and the folks in Ghana giving another, and saying, well, what are they saying? And if they were talking to each other, what would they say about this material? And that helps us kind of extract the essence of what's coming back. So you're not saying you actually ask them to fight it out between
themselves? No. We say, okay, that's what they're saying, this is what they're saying, and they both have points, and really what can we learn about this so the 2 points of view were in conversation. So anyway, and of course the other obvious that you all know is being aware of biases and soapboxes. Everybody has them, and that's okay. But it does help, if you understand them, it helps you interpret what you're getting. And also be aware of your own, of course, which I think is a key part of the training and curriculum itself. So I don't know if there's other, I think this room has a lot of rich experience with field testing, pre-testing, post-testing materials. Are there guidelines that you'd recommend?
I'm going to recommend this book again, the Developing Materials on HIV,
That's
et cetera. I just think this is a great thing. It has a section on pre-testing, it has forms and tabulations, and talks about pre-testing messages and images, so I think it's a great tool.
Developing materials on HIV for those that are.
There's a link we put up there. You can basically Google this title, and you can download a PDF. It's by FHI and PATH. And there's another one exactly like this about vaccinations. This one's focused on HIV, but it's the same principles, which you can use for anything. And, yeah. Okay, so that's right there. So field testing images is really important. Field testing content is really important. And field testing content and images together is really important. It's easier to field test images sometimes, and so I just want to point that out. It's an easier thing to ask people to comment on. Yeah, back in the news.
Okay, well, I'll just put in another plug because I've actually adapted much of the content of that book to this young child receiving and development of a lot of different
Great.
in the context of HIV and the UNICEF IYCF package. And online under UNICEF there is, for the community IYCF counseling package, there is a planning and adaptation guide, and we provided a number of tools for field testing, those specific materials. But there's just some good guidance, I think, in developing your protocol for testing the material, samples of field testing, focus group discussions, in-depth interviews.
Great.
And it could give you all some ideas. And I wholly believe in adapting the good material that's out there. And so that is specifically for maternal infant children.
Hey, if you can send me the link to that, I can pass that on to people. Marvel.
Yeah, it's the UNICEF on their website, the whole package of infant and child community counseling package. And under that, there's something called the planning and adaptation guide. That's a number of tools.
Any other contributions or guidelines around field testing?
Keep it simple. Yeah. You know, sometimes we get into field testing and we make it so complicated that it takes 3 or 4 months to analyze our data and come up with, So I really, really encourage people to do a little harder in terms of, and more practical in terms of being able to work with the field testing teams to analyze the data on the spot, to work with the technical people as soon as the field test is possible, to reach consensus and to move forward, because otherwise you get caught up in, you can spend a lot of time. So I don't know what other people's experience has been, but when you get into having to translate the data so that somebody can plug it into a computer program to analyze it, there are some very practical tips for analyzing your field test data that are practical and that can get you where you want to be.
And are those on the UNICEF? Okay, great. Good. Other thoughts?
Yeah, another very obvious one is however much time you think it's going to take to field test, actually plan that in when you're analyzing your when and when you're doing your Gantt chart. And
the other thing is,
yeah, so people don't, and that's when this gets dropped.
in the timeline discussion, be prepared for the fact that some of that field test feedback is going to tell you you have to start over again.
Exactly.
Yes, be open to that.
That is one of the biggest challenges, is there's so much pressure on the timeline that you field test, and then there's no space to actually deal with what you learned from field testing. So that can be a challenge too. Yeah.
I just want to add one more point, not just field testing time, but money.
Yeah.
Budget.
Yeah, it costs money, and you don't want, if you want it to happen quickly too, giving the group enough resources to come together and meet is certainly a critical thing. Great. Okay.
Okay, I think the last thing is really about localization, and then I think we're going to take a brief break. And but I did want to show you. Oh, here we can skip through these slides. These are some examples of field test feedback that we got from various parts of the world. So we're going to talk a little bit about localization in the context of repackaging information that we do and that we want people on the ground and implementers to be able to do. And I just wanted to share a few tools that we've got that may help that process along. So basically, when we write content, we're writing it in a way that's designed to be repackaged in the first place. So I guess I wanted everybody to know that we're writing it in part, not just for that community health worker at the community level, but also for someone like you, the curriculum developer, thinking about how you can repackage that content. And I'll show you a few examples in a minute. But one of the things that we've recently developed is that we put the material into a health wiki format that is much more flexible and easy to borrow and repackage. You can cut and paste in a way that PDF did not let you do. So this is actually designed to help people do that, and I'll show you a minute briefly about that. We've been playing around with setting up some templates to help people do flyers. Probably in this room, you all are pretty experienced with, what programs do you use? What programs do you use for some? InDesign. InDesign? Some people do stuff in Word still. Publisher.
Visio, even if you're doing symbols.
Okay, so you all are, and you're all experienced designers, or you work with experienced designers. Some folks on the ground who are trying to make their own handouts and flyers need some help with templates, which is one of the things that's discovered through some field testing. So we're also designing some templates that are easy for people to plug in some content and be able to make at least a two-page handout for a training. And then we can talk about ideas for supporting field staff in the next section of the workshop. So I'm going to switch back over to screen share really briefly. So very briefly, the Health Wiki. This is our website. I'm actually going to look at the new writers and adopter chapters. Actually, how many of you here do agriculture stuff versus nutrition? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, but community guys, my screen is being shared. Okay. We're going to go. This is some chapters of the new writers and adopter that we're developing. And one of those is on water and sanitation, good food makes for good health. That's useful for you all. Caring for children is the section that has the care for accounting for malnourished children. And let's look at newborn babies and breastfeeding. So here you go. So this is the chapter, and it's got, you know, the little topics inside the chapter that you can jump around to go to breastfeeding. And this is the content that's in there. So what's over here is the list of languages that it's already in. So let's say you're working in English, but you want to see that same content in Haitian Creole.
Cool.
There you go. So it's designed to really help you navigate across languages, which is really helpful. It's also a lot easier to search, which we could search around if we had time, but that's maybe less to the point for this. But I'm going to...
And that's all, that's new content, not electronically translated.
This is actually brand new content. We
MCDs is something that we're developing for, and it's going to be the next chapter. So, but non-communicable disease program. Sorry, jargon. So this is a poster or a handout I made last night in Word using text boxes, which is way more rudimentary than the folks in this room use, but it might represent the skill level of your field staff, maybe. And all I did was cut and paste from the wiki right over here. I didn't do anything. Now that it's in Word, I can easily edit it. You know, if I want to, I actually don't want this thing to be breastfeeding. I want it to be support for a new mother. I can just type that in.
So it kept all that formatting.
It kept all that formatting.
Wow.
But for those of you that work across languages, this is, again, some localization. So I can replace this text right now by just going back into the wiki and, let's see, for English, you want to go to Creole? Shall we replace it with Creole? So, right. And I'm doing this without my glasses on, folks. This is really the degree of difficulty here.
So it's just a cut and paste.
It is. Oh my goodness. That's the website. Sorry. Let me see. All right. Sorry, guys. So it is literally cut and paste here. We'll try and grab one.
So with that, you didn't write like you did like Control-C or?
Yeah, I literally just did Control-C. Of course, it didn't work.
And then Control-V on the other one, or paste? Okay.
Yeah, it's super easy that way. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, now this time this is not any longer. But you can also resize anything you want. And it's just using text boxes in Word. So, again, this is, this is really rudimentary for you all, but it is a good example of what you might be able to encourage folks on the ground to do. Now, again, you're not going to necessarily want them to just do that, but from there to have them edit it and localize it is another step much easier to take. They may want to swap out the image. They may want to edit it to add something very specific to a local practice. You may want to put in some references, but it makes it that much easier for the field staff to actually do that. So it's one way that I think we're looking to see how we can support this. But actually, you all form part of the community that we're trying to serve, so we're looking for feedback from you about what would help. And that's what I look forward to in the next discussion, actually, is sort of what will help support that kind of localization. But that is at least some of what I wanted to cover with this, and I think my time is close to up, so we can talk a little bit about localization and tools for localization.
Let me mention one thing. Also, I think this is best practice for us. When you put your materials up, make it like on the caregroup.info.org site, we're trying to make PDF and Word. So whatever you put up, put it up in a form that, knowing that people are going to want to edit it, knowing that it's going to do some good, don't require that people keep it exactly as is because it's not going to spread and be as useful. So I think this should be our standard, that we try to make things that are more open source like this.
Yeah, and we did put a lot of, we did field test quite heavily the wiki, and while it has room for improvement, it's actually pretty user-friendly. We field tested it with women in Honduras learning to use a computer to see what a first-time computer user would be able to do with this. And then I'm the obvious Luddite. They always let me break everything to see if I can make it work or not. But so it's been heavily field tested that way. And so you might look at some of the things that we've learned from the design in terms of just layout and usability, and also give us feedback on how to continue to improve it. So again, content that's designed to be repackaged and it's there for you to use. We really encourage you to use it. Images for you to use as well, and this wiki that we hope will make it easier easier for also the field staff you're working with to sort of operate in cross-language settings. Some of what we wanted to share with you. Yeah. Are there comments or questions about localization and about this in particular? And if not, we can kind of, are we taking a break or are we just moving straight into it? Okay. Okay, so just any final questions or comments on this? Everybody really wants their coffee break, I suspect. Well, I do, my card is over there, and I'll give you cards. I encourage you to be in touch with us, because this is actually something that we're really seeking feedback to continue to improve. We'd like to know if templates is helpful to field staff that you work with. We'd love your input on a lot of that stuff. So again, just stay in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead. We don't have a break on the agenda, but I think we all need one. Yeah. Let's take about a 5-minute break and come on back. No, I know. Yeah, so which part of it?
Oh, they are so much fun. Oh, yeah. No,
Good, thank you.